Good morning, everyone. This is Mike Franken for Iowa with the 7 May update on the coronavirus. This is going to take a slightly different turn this morning. We're going to talk more broadly about the president and his actions. In addition to pandemics, I've worked development issues worldwide numerous times, and two overriding considerations come into play when countries do poorly day to day and also especially during epidemics or situations of strife, and that is incompetence and corruption. The Trump administration began exhibiting these two traits early in 2017, and this is really crescendoed as this coronavirus has struck this nation. Just to talk a little bit about incompetence, the president has tremendous trust in his abilities to understand complex issues, and he has little room to hear contrary perspectives. We have seen those around him, his acolytes, including Senator Ernst, adore his comments and not take issue with his demonstrably negative or wrong statements. Any kind of negative comment just doesn't come his way from those who are most reliant on his glory and his tweets. He is, frankly, in Navy terms, he's out with the lash, and like everyone around him, everyone close to him, he's had them walk the plank if they've strayed from his adoring eyes. But what's ever happened to the brave, competent people, the expert people who joined his organizations and have dared to disagree with him? Well, they saw belittlement and public attack. No longer does the 4 o'clock knock on the door prove that you're disloyal, like that would be done in the fetid authoritative regimes of past. Rather, you get the 5 a.m. tweet from the president saying you're out. And I still wonder who this person is who called a professional associate a dog. Just so you know, I still hold that near and dear to my heart, that we would never elect a president in the United States who would call somebody who worked for him a dog, but here we are. Those public servants are fired, and the likelihood of miscalculation grows with every day. I just noticed today the U.S. Institute of Peace did a corollary of what's happened with Iran with this coronavirus versus the United States, and the United States has done worse than the Islamic Republic of Iran. So that's a poor statement of fact. So these 3 years have treated us to numerous examples of the odd behavior of this president. Early on, we saw his attacks on the intelligence community and the FBI. The first to go was the venerated Dan Coats, who I knew from my 2 times on the Hill while he was a senator. Because mostly the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, Coats, contracted or contrasted with Trump's perspective on the world. The next to go was my fellow 3-star Navy Admiral, Joe McGuire. Joe has all the experience in the world and is altruistic in his heart and is very deliberative in his decision making. He brought to Congress a whistleblower report, and out went Joe. Unsurprisingly, Trump grew weary of the experienced and conscientious and officials, and he turned to hacks. He elevated a loyalist with little intelligence experience, Rick Grinnell, and replacing him now with another loyalist, John Ratcliffe, who makes up his voice of inexperience with an extraordinary amount of loyalty. This is what we see from quasi-dictators. There are other dire instances of his behavior. The president warns experts about climate change. The president ignores experts about climate change, whether out of his own ignorance or political expediency purposes. This is true for our Senator Joni Ernst as well. Another example, Americans should be proud that our National Institute of Health, the world's premier medical entity and research foundation, Donald Trump consistently tries to kill their budget. Thankfully for Congress, so in a moment of lucidity, they keep it going. A third one will be proud that the United States Department of Agriculture, the world leader in agricultural research, like it or not, as a farming state, they do far more good than otherwise. The undersecretary is required by law to be chosen amongst a field of professionals specializing in agricultural research, education, and economics. Following the letter of the law, Donald Trump took a supporter, Sam Clovis, who is a talk show radio host, versus an expert in anything other than bloviating on the radio. NASA's Administrator Bridenstine is an interesting example as well. Finally, there's something afoot with the president's coronavirus response itself. Run by Jared Kushner, the group tasked with procuring the PPE that we all crave to get is made up of volunteers from various consulting firms. And when they worked and found out that they couldn't get anything done, they came to the conclusion that they didn't have any experience. Shocking. In an atmosphere of corruption, they also tried to fast track some protective equipment from VIP organizations. These VIPs were not experts at Johns Hopkins or Caltech or something of significance, University of Iowa or Iowa State. They were actually Fox News hosts. So much for that. We're also asked to create a model of how much PPE the government needs. Well, when they came back with that model, they suddenly were silenced because their model came out with some extraordinary number that the administration could never achieve, and it ran contrary to what the president was saying. So the sheer incompetence of this administration is a problem. The organization that fills key vacancies and retirements is headed up by a 30-year-old Fox News host. And I'll just tell you anecdotally, friends of mine that went into this administration early on and were told to go up to this floor in this room in the Trump Tower to talk to the person who's hiring. They came into the room and were amazed to see just Steve Bannon sitting there at a lone desk saying, see your stuff. Have you ever spoken negatively about the president? That was your gate to get approved or to be disapproved. That's probably not a good idea. In a comedy of errors, even Trump loyalists complain about the Trump loyalists. All right, now let's talk a little bit about corruption. There is deep corruption in this, and as we would expect when we voted Donald Trump in. This is his history as a New York developer, and I think the Republicans knew this when they elected him. And ultimately, when he was elected, they fell in and they've become supportive. Those that have chosen not to run again have done so probably out of conscience of effort. The president has kept ownership of his companies and has not disclosed their earnings. We know this. His companies, for instance, charge full price to the Secret Service when they stay there. That's annoying to me. And foreign governments stay in his hotels, and everybody's okay with that. Everybody's okay with that. The president says he knows nothing about it. He says, why would anybody care? The whole Prestwick, Ireland issue, and I stayed there when I was in the service. I stayed in the barracks, but when military people stay there now, they stay at the Trump Resort, many, many miles away on curvy roads. It's actually dangerous to drive from Prestwick Airport to Trump Resort. For those of you who have been to that area of Scotland, and yet we do that knowingly. We would never do that in 1988 when I spent a lot of time in that area of the world. Whatever. As an admiral, I was not permitted to hold stock in companies, and my financial dealings were absolutely open, looked at by lawyers, pecked over by internal auditors, etc. Yet this president, we know nothing about his finances, and I'm sure if we ever uncovered it, we ever got a look at it, it would be a dog's breakfast of corruption. Who wouldn't agree with me on that point? I think everybody in government service ought to put their finances in a blind trust and leave them there. If you can't do that, then you shouldn't be in government service. It's as simple as that. Our senators, where are they in this fight? I don't know. They know who butter their bread, though. Being a part of a cult-like following of this president. A lone individual is soon kicked off the island, and it's reason not to be in government service if you can't abide by the restrictions previously placed on government service. It's as simple as that. So how does this relate to the coronavirus? Well, not listening to real experts is a disaster. It leads to disasters. And that may be why the United States is doing so much worse than other countries. The much maligned intelligence community sent dozens of reports to the White House. They ignored them. The World Health Organization gave dire warnings. We ignored them, and then we got off the funding to them. Rick Bright was removed from the Department of Health and Human Services because he was unwilling to promote the snake oils that the president was pushing. And experts like Anthony Fauci, well, we know his days are limited, don't we? I would expect so. But the CDC was allowed to futz around with a test that didn't work for 40 days while the virus spread. We didn't use the WHO test. Why? I don't know. And what do we see from this muck of incompetence and corruption? Well, experts are thrown on the side of briefing rooms. Hacks and experts are ignored, or correction, hacks are experts. So let me review that. So what do we see from this muck of incompetence and corruption? Well, experts are thrown to the side of the briefing room. Hacks are promoted to be their spokespeople. And the crisis response is uncoordinated at best. The president's circle gets smaller and smaller, quirkier, quieter, quieter, and America stands by and wonders. And our elected leaders on the Senate side are silent. So this is how you make a crisis worse, progressively so. The crisis is the necessity for experience and principled leadership. There's a story. Back in 2002, when we're talking about the invasion of Iraq, I said, this is a bad idea, and you got to stand alone when it's that time. And the compliments of the Bush administration, having voted against the invasion, standing alone that day, I wasn't kicked off the island. Matter of fact, I was progressively elevated, and good for them. Had we had more Mike Frankens in the room, perhaps we would not have invaded Iraq. And perhaps if we had more senators who spoke out against this president would be a little bit not the way he is, and America would be better off and lives would be saved. So Joni Ernst, where are you in all of this conversation? Where's your principled leadership? Where's any scintillating aspect of leadership whatsoever? Iowans need a leader. The country needs a leader. Where are you? The Senate is in session today. The coronavirus select committee is being talked about. We're going to reconsider the FISA funding, etc. It's business as usual. But it's not business as usual back here in Iowa. We still have a progressively increasing caseload of coronaviruses, and we're led by the president, who's telling out of political expediencies what the governors ought to be saying. And we're not better for it, we're worse for it. So let's get leaders in the U.S. Senate. This is Mike Franken signing off. Thank you.